What if I told you that one of the most popular fruits in the world has a secret? A radioactive secret. Yep, today we're going to peel back the science on the radioactive banana.
I know. That's a pretty wild question to ask. But the answer is yeah, almost certainly. And here's the thing. That's not a bad thing. Not at all. In fact, it's completely 100% natural.
You know, when most of us hear the word radiation, our minds jump straight to like nuclear power plants, or maybe getting an X-ray at the dentist. But that's really not the whole picture, not even close. The truth is, radiation is literally all around us, and a huge chunk of it is just natural.
And to get a handle on this, we don't need to go to some complicated lab or a giant power plant. Nope, we just need to look at something you might have actually had for breakfast this morning. Yep, the humble banana.
Believe it or not, and this number might shock you, a whopping 85% of the radiation dose an average person gets every single year comes from totally natural sources. We're talking about the sun, the soil under our feet, the air we breathe, and yeah, even the food we eat.
That's right. A single banana, it emits about 15 becquerels of radiation. So what does that mean? It means about 15 of its atoms are decaying every single second. Now, it's a super tiny amount, but it's totally real, it's measurable, and it gives us this perfect everyday starting point. So how on earth does it get there in the first place? Well, the secret ingredient, if you will, is an element we all know and actually need to live: potassium. Bananas are famous for being loaded with potassium, right? And that, right there, is the key to this whole thing. Okay, so it all starts down in the soil. As a banana plant is growing, its roots are soaking up nutrients, including that vital potassium. But here's the catch, and it's a good one. The plant has no way of telling the difference between a totally normal, stable potassium atom and a slightly different radioactive version of it. So it just absorbs both. So when that banana plant is drinking up potassium, almost all of it, I mean the vast majority, is totally stable. But there's this tiny little consistent fraction. We're talking about 0.01%. That's a naturally radioactive isotope called Potassium-40.
And that is what makes the banana a tiny, natural, radioactive engine. It's this minuscule amount of Potassium-40, so let's take a look at how this little engine actually works.
So Potassium-40 isn't something new. It's ancient. It's what scientists call a primordial radionucleone, which is just a fancy way of saying it's been a part of our planet's makeup since the very beginning. And get this, it has a half-life of over 1 billion years, so it decays incredibly slowly. And it's that super slow decay process that releases that little bit of energy we call radiation.
So what do we even mean by decay? Well, all it means is that the unstable Potassium-40 atom naturally changes or transforms into a completely stable, harmless element, like calcium or argon. And when it makes that switch, it releases a tiny little burst of energy. That is the radiation we can actually measure. Okay, let's recap. We know bananas have a tiny bit of radioactive Potassium-40, and we know it decays naturally. But the big question is, so what? What does that actually mean for us? How can we possibly measure this in a way that makes any kind of sense?
Well, to make sense of these incredibly tiny amounts of radiation, scientists came up with a really clever, informal unit of measurement. It's called the banana equivalent dose, or BED for short. It's basically a way to talk about radiation dose using, you guessed it, a banana, something we can all wrap our heads around.
So one banana equivalent dose, it's equal to about 0.1 microsieverts. That's the technical term. Think of that as our baseline, our starting point. Now let's put that number into perspective and see how it stacks up against other things.
All right, check this out. Getting a single chest X-ray, that gives you a dose equivalent to eating about 100 bananas all at once. Taking a transatlantic flight, say from New York to London, that's like eating 400 bananas. Suddenly, the radiation from just one banana seems pretty darn small, doesn't it?
But let's zoom out and look at the really big picture. See that tiny sliver on the left? That's one banana. Now compare that to the natural background radiation we all get every single year. That's the equivalent of 25,000 bananas. And a dose that would actually be fatal? You would need to eat, wait for it, 20 million bananas all at once. Yeah. It really drives home the point that our bodies are perfectly built to handle the tiny, tiny dose from one little banana.
So you might be thinking, if the dose is so ridiculously small, why are we even talking about it? What's the point? Well, because understanding the radioactive banana, it's about so much more than just the fruit.
See, that potassium-40 from food like bananas literally becomes a part of our bodies. It contributes to our own natural internal radiation dose. And again, this isn't a bad thing at all. It's just a part of the natural system that our biology has evolved to live with and handle perfectly fine.
And that's why the banana is so important. It's the perfect teaching tool. It helps push back against what's called radiophobia, that irrational fear of radiation, by showing us in a super simple way that is just a normal part of life. It also perfectly illustrates one of the oldest rules in science: the dose makes the poison. It's not about what it is, but how much. And once you get that, you can have much more rational, informed conversations about big topics like nuclear energy or medical scans.
When you really think about it, this completely reframes the whole issue, doesn't it? Radiation isn't some unnatural, scary threat that we invented. It's just a natural, fundamental feature of the world we live in.
And that kind of leaves us with one final, pretty cool thought. If a simple, everyday banana holds such a fascinating story about physics and biology, what other incredible scientific secrets are just hiding in plain sight, maybe right there on our kitchen tables? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.